Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, and this podcast I've entitled, What's a Good Relationship? Now, if you're new to my podcasts, what I try to do in the information sharing is give people tools and tips for how to deal with conflict in relationships, how to keep it fresh, and if you're looking for a relationship, then giving you tips on how to find that person for you. Knowing about yourself, I think, is one of the most important things to have when you are looking for someone to be connected to. I know there's a lot of romance in the idea that, well, I need to find somebody that completes me. And that's a romantic notion, and it's good to feel that connection to someone. But it's important to know yourself so that when you're in the process of learning about the other person, you know where you are compatible. And if you sense there's some incompatibility, well, then you're going to need tools for being able to navigate those things, because when you meet a person, it's a package. You take the good with the not so spectacular, and you try to make a relationship work. So there again, I talk about all of these things in my podcasts, and one of the other things I like to mention is giving you the tools to problem solve, and that is dealing with conflict is a very important piece to being in a relationship. And if something happens that it gets beyond what you feel you have the skill to handle, well, then I believe in calling in the referees. Who are referees? That would be like a therapist, a counselor, a psychologist, a minister, someone who is capable of helping you and your partner see what the conflict is about and to resolve it. I think that's very important. That's a very important thing to be able to do in your relationship. So going back to what's a good relationship, nothing in any particular order. I'm just going to name some things and talk about them. You know, these are the kind of things to look for. So here's a big one. What's a good relationship? Something that has the capacity to be able to do the problem solving. Every person has their own feelings about what they want, and no two people are exactly alike, nor should you necessarily expect them to be. But when the differences come up, being able to resolve the differences, and a lot of things really don't even hit the scale of anything to worry about, but there are times when things tend to, let's say, get on each other's nerves. And how you handle that, whether it's the facial expressions, whether some people are passive aggressive. See, these things tend to come out in really subtle ways, and sometimes we don't even know we do them. So if your partner were to say to you, you're being passive aggressive, how might that land on you? And what if you felt the need to be able to express that same sentiment to your partner? How might that land on them? How do you feel about saying those kinds of things? Well, again, dealing with conflict is probably one of the most important tools to be able to have in a relationship, and having the temperament, the personality to handle these things. It's easy to make an observation about your partner or someone that you have great affection for. It could even be your children. So a lot of these things, it doesn't have to be the lover in your life, but somebody else you have some connection with. So think of it that way too. To be able to point out something of a conflict or somebody else's behavior that you don't like and have it land on them and then want to resolve it to some mutual satisfaction. But what if somebody were to say something to you about, wow, you seem like you're acting passive aggressive. Now that's their word choice and they're expressing their feelings. When that lands on you, how are you going to react to that? Well, I think the relationship quality really determines how you're going to react. Because if you have a lot of confidence in your relationship, you have a lot of confidence in the love, something like that, when it lands, I think it's going to give you reason to pause and wonder why your partner would feel that way. And you go the direction of trying to resolve it, not as adversaries, but as someone who is listening to your partner share their feelings. Now, that's not to say that it doesn't hurt. That's to say that you put that knee-jerk reaction aside. That knee-jerk reaction is to tell them how wrong they are and tell them in a way that makes it sound like their feelings are invalid. Now, the thing that I'm going to tell you is most counselors will explain that people have feelings, and their feelings, you own them. I can't tell you your feelings are wrong. You can't tell me mine are wrong. Now, we're also coming from the heart. We're being honest. We're not here trying to do anything underhanded or manipulative. We're just sharing our feelings, and we do that the best we can. Sometimes our word choice isn't what you would like, but it is still sharing the feeling. So we have to get started somehow. So we got the words out there. Now we want to deal with it. Again, going back to the quality of a good relationship, it's one in which you can take on this task of drilling this down to what the important elements are. And again, I talk in my other podcasts about communication. So we've communicated something, and what's good about this relationship is we feel comfortable in actually saying something when it bothers us. Because a lot of people have relationships in which they do not feel comfortable sharing their feelings, sharing their heart. What they are comfortable doing is being the person who's the pleaser. When you first meet somebody, you want to be attractive, you want to be interesting, and a lot of people try to keep it right there in that space. A relationship that has had any length of time on the road, you're going to find it difficult to be able to have that facade all the time. Your partner is going to need to know the other parts of who you are. You're not so shiny parts, the parts where you don't feel the best, when you don't feel very loving. But that doesn't mean you don't love the person. It's just it might be really hard in this moment for you to express that. And having a relationship in which you can still be the you and your partner still wants to be in it with you, that's something worth having. Because I know many people exist in the relationship with the idea that they can't do anything different than the way they did it when they first met, because if they change something now, it's like it's changing the rules. And some people take it that way. They say, well, you weren't like this at first. How come all of a sudden you're doing this right now? Those are the reactions of people who have a hard time dealing with change and probably have a difficult time dealing with conflict. And that works both ways. It's one thing to point out the conflict. It's another thing to be the cause of it. And when you are the one who has to really look in the mirror and say, well, you brought this to bear, you're the reason for this, do you have the courage to be able to apologize, to want to change for the benefit of the relationship? And I want to express this. A relationship, I like to say it's like a three-legged stool. There are three entities. There's you, there's the other person, and there's the relationship. And when you think about commitment, you're not only committed to the other person, you're committed to the relationship. And I want you to hang on to that concept because when I come back after the break, I'm going to explain that a little bit more. Stay tuned.
The GSMC Sex Podcast is a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet. Download the GSMC Sex Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you can find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hello and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. Now, picking up where I left off, I was talking about yourself, your partner, and the relationship, the commitment, and why this concept is so vitally important. Because quite often people wonder, why am I in this relationship? What's keeping me here? And I know the word commitment, and people understand that, what that means. Is floating around in the back of your head. Your partner has just really things are just getting to you, and the referee part isn't working just yet. You probably haven't gotten there. And when you finally decide that you're going to call in, raise the white flag, call for help, and that's when you get therapists, counselors, your minister, whoever is your advisor, something like this. And you ask yourself, why am I spending this time with this? It's because of the commitment. Now, you may not feel very close to your partner at that moment, or in those moments. You may be more frustrated than anything else. But what you're committed to is you're committed to the relationship. That concept of something that's important to you, somebody that's going to be there for you, no matter it's the good days or bad, that's why you're doing it. Now, when you get to a point when you decide that having the relationship is not what you want, then that's a different conversation. And I can talk about that at another time. But I want to talk about what's a good relationship. And it's having that commitment to the relationship, and also knowing that your partner has a commitment to the relationship. You may not feel in those moments that your partner is committed to you because of the conflict. But I'd like to liken this to, wow, there's a double. I'd like to express this in a way that says we're both committed to the relationship. We're having a rough time, but it's really important that you know for yourself that they are committed to the relationship, even though there may be some friction between the two of you. Because remember, that happens between human beings. We're not all alike, nor were we really meant to be. It's how things work together. Because if you were exactly alike, you would be bored to death. There's no excitement in that. I mean, could you really date yourself? I mean, think about it. Would you go out with yourself? Probably not. You might find a lot of things that you like about who you are. But I think what you would, in time, maybe not right away, but in time, you would find yourself, you're bored because you know everything about yourself. Would you want to date somebody you know everything about? No, you like a little bit of mystery. That's human nature. And to keep that going is also to say people have different feelings about things. And when you get in a relationship with somebody who has their own mind, they have their own feelings, they like to be what they want as much as they want you to have what you want, there's compromise. You got to find a way to do that. And a good relationship has compromise. Find that out. Understand what it means to you to have compromise. Understand what it means to your partner for compromise. So I've named a couple of things: being able to resolve conflict, having a compromise, having a commitment to the relationship. Those are very important things. Now, another thing to want to add is trust. Now, that may sound very, very elemental. Of course, trust is important, but let me explain why it's important. It's not just because it is, because that's a word that comes out of people's mouths all the time. But a lot of people don't understand what trust is about. So let me take you back to the very, very beginning. When you're a baby, you depend on your mom and dad for survival. You depend on them to protect you, to help you exist in the world until you get on to where you can take care of yourself. Now, that space between mom and dad taking care of you and then you being on your own, now there's a lot of life that happens in there. I'm jumping ahead here. And in those experiences, we experience a lot of disappointment. Okay? You know that. You go from being able to depend on mom and dad entirely. You know that when you cry, mom or dad's going to come and get you. They're going to rescue you. If something happens, you know you're going to get rescued. Then you move along to that place in life where you're on your own. You're responsible for yourself. There isn't somebody to come rescue you. So, and some people do that better than others. But I'm setting up the understanding about trust. When you find somebody later on in life who you're compatible with, you feel like you have those warm feelings, and the word trust comes up. And this is really important that we understand the concept, because as it is in your head, you've developed a concept of trust based on your life's experience. Yeah, you can read words, you can hear other people's definitions of it, but it's how you experience your life and then what you observe out of another person that says, okay, you know what? I trust that person. You want to be with that person. You know, if something happens, that person is going to be there for you, and building that, because, you know, you're not going to have that with any and everyone. I think that's one of the things that makes trust so hard, because we know we can't trust everybody. And that's not the bad part about it. That's the part about that understands that people are different, and people that are going to be in your life, they're going to have to work to be in your life, and vice versa. You're going to have to work to be in your life. And that's hard to do with lots and lots and lots of people. So as we experience individuals who come and go in our life, then there are those that we start paring it down. We have several, and then there's a few less than that, and then fewer and fewer. And now we get to that person who you've spent time with, you've asked the questions, you've done I'm doing the air quotes here, you've done the relationship interview, and you feel like, okay, I want to invest time in this individual because, wow, they have, they're pretty, they're intelligent, they have all of those other things that sound like stuff that you would want in your relationship. And then you find out, wow, they really have that capacity to commit, and they like to problem solve. I see that they command some pretty good skills in communicating. And now you get to that part about trust. And it's being able to be vulnerable and know that you will be safe. You see, we did that with our parents, and we learned something about being able to rely on someone. And that's a role model, and I'm thinking of the good ones. And I know there's a lot of variations in between, but we begin to learn when we can be vulnerable and can depend on someone. That's an element of how trust develops in us. And now we are looking for someone, we are consciously looking for someone who can do that and be consistent with it. It's really easy to find people who can be inconsistent. And we can pay our money and have people show up and develop a sort of trust, but that's kind of like the barter system in that way. You have to pay for it. Whereas you don't always have money for this. And this is where a relationship with someone is more significant, because it's not about the money. It's about the connection. They trust you, you trust them, it's understood. And just for illustration, when you take it to the next step, then you have a commitment with this person that you have each other's backs. So I've described, there's the trust. There is the relationship itself, there's the commitment. There is the desire to resolve conflict. And that takes a lot of doing. I need to take a break. I'm going to come right back and I'm going to expand on these some more. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm John Johnson and talking about what's a good relationship. Now, as a point of reference, you probably noticed I haven't mentioned something like sex. Isn't that important in a relationship? Yes, it's important to a lot of people. But in the context of the foundation of the relationship, I've been talking about trust, the vulnerability, knowing that somebody has your back, being committed to the relationship, even though it may be difficult to be committed to your partner at any point in time. And, dealing with the conflict, those kinds of things are fundamental to a good relationship. And if you have those kinds of things in your relationship, you've got a pretty good relationship. Now, these things could use a tune-up from time to time. If something slips, you can maybe read a book, maybe go to a relationship seminar, learn a few skills, and bring those back to the relationship. But it's that foundation that allows you to build on it. And having the intimacy, it's the relationship. It's part of it as much as anything else. But again, being able to be committed to your partner in the good times as well as the not so good times, those are things we have to learn. And we learn to do that when we can learn to trust our partner and they can learn to trust us. Now, that can be really hard to do. See, that all ties in with that vulnerability and not wanting to be vulnerable and then wanting them to trust us. But then, maybe we might not want to trust them at this moment. See, it's something that learns it. You have to work your way through this kind of stuff. And early on, when I was talking about how you communicate, listening to your partner, even when your partner might be a little bit upset at you, maybe you don't like the words they use, but they at least are trying to communicate the message. Like I say, we can work on that over time. And again, time helps build the trust, helps build the foundation, which gives us the relationship in which we can put all of these things on it and really have a nice investment. And this is something that it doesn't matter how rich you are or how not rich you are. It's really about the individuals. And as I mentioned earlier, I've done other podcasts that give you information on the kinds of things to look for in a person that would be compatible to you, the kinds of questions to ask. And I think just as important, let me take a step back in this, it's really about knowing yourself. You need to know a lot about yourself. Now, you can learn a great deal about yourself in a relationship. And I think that's another very important piece of something to know. We are different with every person because we're all different. You say something, a different person reacts to it. And somebody who you may be intimately involved with may give you a different reaction. They may give you a free pass on something that might be a little difficult for somebody who is not your intimate partner to even want to engage in. So we're different for everyone. But given that, we understand the nuances to who we are, and we like to find compatibility with someone who not only shares our interest, but someone that also sparks our interest and inspires us as I would want to inspire my partner. That's something to shoot for. When you have those kinds of things in your relationship, it's a good one. Believe me, it's a good one. A lot of people are constantly searching. And I think that's another thing about the vulnerability and the fear is when you are worried that the person that you have a love interest in is not necessarily satisfied with you, that they're constantly on the search, that leaves that relationship in sort of a really unsettled place. But when you get past that and are able to get to the commitment part, and you know that that person is going to be there, then you know that you can work on the rough stuff and that person is going to be there. That's really important. And again, that goes back to that trust that I was talking about earlier. Like I said, when you were a little baby, you knew you could trust mom and dad were going to protect you. And then as you got out there into the world, you find that other people don't have that commitment to you. So now you're about learning who you are, looking for people who are similar that you could share yourself with and who will be as faithful and as committed as you would want them to be. And when you share that, when you build on those kinds of things, then you have a good relationship. Now, how far you want to go with that, again, that's based on where you can go with that person. You can discuss those things. But that's a good relationship. And I want you to be able to use those markers, those indicators that says it to you. Because sometimes you don't even know that you have a good one. Because nobody is telling you that, no, that's a good trait to have. We are so caught up in what we're afraid of, we forget to take stock in what actually works. And I think something to realize is a lot of times we're our own worst enemy because we create conflict when there isn't one. And it happens out of fear. I've certainly have done something like that myself. We tend to overanalyze, complicate things to the extent that we're trying to wipe away the mystery, but we're making it more and more cloudy. So watch yourself for that tendency. You may have a good thing and it's very simple. Sometimes it's so simple we don't even see it. So be mindful of that when you're in a relationship with someone. You have a pretty good connection and you're trying to qualify this. Maybe you're wanting to compare it to other relationships you've had. Well, that's fair. But also think about it in the context of, where are you right now in life? You are a product of all of your experiences. And my hope for you is that you're able to build on what you have learned, not to make you more afraid, but to use that as wisdom so that as you go forward, you're able to determine, hey, this is a good person. This is a person for me. I can trust them. They can trust me. We can go on and we can do things together. And if that being the case, you have a person that's already in your life, then use your life's experience to be able to measure how much you do have. That's a good thing. That's a really good thing. That's a powerful tool you have. You don't have to go to anyone else. Use your own life as a measuring stick. I think you have to consider how you as an individual may be a bit of a challenge to be with from time to time. And the fact that somebody really wants to be there and invest in you, because one of the things that I've always said is somebody who's willing to put up with you and your stuff is someone who you might want to consider hanging on to, keeping in your life. I mean, we'd like to think that we're pretty and we're shiny and polished as a new jewel on the outside, but, the inside, we still have stuff going on which causes us to do things that aren't always the most loving. So think about it. You got a good relationship. You want to hang on to it. I've given you a number of things that I think make up the components of a good relationship. So apply them. Evaluate your relationship. See what works. And if there's a few things that aren't hitting, then work on those. Shine it up a bit. Share this with your partner. and you can have a great relationship. I'm John Johnson. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. Thanks for listening.